Mrs. Rachel Lynde loved sitting by her window, watching everything that happened in her village, Avonlea. One afternoon, she saw something very strange. Matthew Cuthbert, who was usually very quiet and stayed home, was driving his buggy down the road. Even more surprising, he was wearing his best clothes. Where could Matthew be going? Mrs. Rachel wondered. She just had to know. After she had tea, Mrs. Rachel put on her bonnet and walked to Green Gables, where Matthew lived with his sister, Marilla. When she got there, she asked Marilla why Matthew had gone out. "Oh, he's gone to pick up a boy from the train station," Marilla said. "A boy?" Mrs. Rachel was shocked. "Yes," Marilla said. "We're adopting a boy from an orphanage. He'll help on the farm." Mrs. Rachel didn't know what to say. She was worried about what kind of boy they would get, but Marilla seemed sure about their decision. As Mrs. Rachel walked home, she thought about how surprised everyone in the village would be to hear about a new child at Green Gables. Matthew rode his buggy to the train station. He liked quiet places and didn't talk much. When he arrived, the train was already gone. Outside, a little girl was sitting alone. The station master said, "That girl is waiting for you." Matthew was surprised. He thought he was picking up a boy, but he couldn't leave the girl alone, so he decided to take her home. "Are you Mr. Matthew Cuthbert?" the girl asked happily. "Yes, I am," Matthew said awkwardly. The girl smiled brightly. "My name is Anne. I'm so happy. I finally have a real home." As they rode in the buggy, Anne talked a lot. She said the trees and flowers were beautiful. When she saw a pond, she said, "I'll call this the Lake of Shining Waters." Matthew listened quietly. Anne kept smiling and talking. Finally, they arrived home. Anne's eyes sparkled. "Is this Green Gables? It's so beautiful." Matthew felt worried. What would Marilla say about a girl instead of a boy? But when he saw Anne's happy face, he thought, maybe this was not a mistake after all. Marilla Cuthbert opened the door and saw a little girl with red hair. She looked surprised. "Matthew, who is this? Where is the boy?" Marilla asked. "There was no boy," Matthew said. "Only her." Marilla frowned. "But we asked for a boy. Mrs. Spencer brought her instead." "I couldn't leave her alone," Matthew explained. The girl's eyes filled with tears. "You don't want me because I'm not a boy," she cried. "Nobody ever wants me," Marilla sighed. "Don't cry. You can stay tonight. What's your name?" "Can you call me Cordelia?" the girl asked. "Is that your name?" Marilla asked. "No, my name is Anne Shirley. But I always wanted to be called Cordelia," Anne said. "If you call me Anne, please spell it with an E." "Anne with an E?" Marilla said with a small smile. "All right. But why did Mrs. Spencer bring you?" "She said you wanted a girl around 11 years old," Anne said sadly. Matthew, feeling nervous, went outside. Marilla asked, "Did Mrs. Spencer bring anyone else?" "Yes, a little girl named Lily." "If I were as pretty as Lily, would you keep me?" Anne asked. "No. We need a boy to help on the farm," Marilla said. "Take off your hat and come eat." Anne took off her hat but couldn't eat. "I'm too sad," she said. Marilla sighed. "You must be tired. I'll show you your room." She led Anne to a small, plain bedroom. "Go to bed now," she said. Anne lay under the covers. How can you call it a good night when it's the worst night of my life? She whispered. Marilla went downstairs. Matthew looked worried. This is a mess, Marilla said. We'll send her back. She's a nice little thing, Matthew said. It's a shame to send her away. Matthew, do you want to keep her? Marilla asked. She's interesting, Matthew said, but it's up to you. I don't want an orphan girl, Marilla said firmly. That night, while Marilla thought and Matthew slept, Anne cried, wondering what would happen tomorrow. Anne and Marilla arrived at Mrs. Spencer's house. Mrs. Spencer was surprised but welcomed them inside. We asked for a boy, but you brought us a girl, Marilla said. Mrs. Spencer looked shocked. Oh no, I thought you wanted a girl. I'm so sorry, Marilla sighed. Can we send Anne back to the orphanage? Before Mrs. Spencer could answer, Mrs. Blewett arrived. She was a strict woman looking for help with her large family. Maybe Anne could work for Mrs. Blewett, Mrs. Spencer suggested. Mrs. Blewett looked at Anne closely. If I take you, you'll have to work hard and behave. Anne's face turned pale. Marilla saw the fear in her eyes and couldn't stand the thought of sending her to such a harsh home. I think I'll take Anne back for now, Marilla said. We haven't decided yet. Anne's eyes filled with hope. Did you really say I might stay? We're thinking about it, Marilla replied. When they returned to Green Gables, Matthew was relieved to see Anne. Later, Marilla told him about Mrs. Spencer and Mrs. Blewett. I wouldn't send her to Mrs. Blewett, Matthew said firmly. Marilla agreed. Since you want her to stay, I suppose we'll keep her. I'll do my best to raise her. Matthew smiled. I knew you'd come around, Marilla. Just be kind to her. I think she'll do well if she feels loved. Marilla nodded, thinking, I won't tell Anne tonight that she can stay. It's surprising I'm considering this, but who knows what will happen next. Anne had lived at Green Gables for 2 weeks when Mrs. Rachel Lynde finally came to visit. Anne had spent her time exploring, making friends with trees and flowers. When Mrs. Rachel arrived, Marilla talked with her first. Mrs. Rachel asked, Why did you keep Anne? You've never raised a child. Marilla said, Matthew liked her and I do too. She's smart but has faults. Then Marilla called Anne inside. Mrs. Rachel looked at her and said, Well, they didn't pick you for your looks. You're so skinny, freckled, and red-haired. Anne turned red with anger. I hate you. How dare you say that? Anne! Marilla scolded. Go to your room now. Anne ran upstairs crying. Mrs. Rachel huffed. You need to punish that temper. After Mrs. Rachel left, Marilla told Anne, You were rude. You must apologize. Anne crossed her arms. I won't. I'm not sorry. Then you'll stay in your room, Marilla said. Anne pouted. Then I'll stay forever. The next morning, Marilla told Matthew about Anne's behavior. Well, Rachel can be harsh, Matthew said. Matthew Cuthbert, Marilla scolded. Anne must be punished. All I'm saying is, be gentle. She's never had anyone to teach her. All day, Anne barely ate. That evening, Matthew sneaked upstairs. Anne, he whispered, don't you think it's time to apologize? Anne thought, I guess I could do it for you, Matthew. Later, Anne called down, Marilla, I'm ready to apologize. Marilla was surprised but said, all right, we'll go after milking. At Mrs. Rachel's house, Anne ran up and said, "Oh, Mrs. Lynde, I'm so sorry. Please forgive me." Mrs. Rachel was startled but smiled. There, child. I forgive you." Anne grinned. "Do you think my red hair might change?" Mrs. Rachel chuckled. "Maybe it will darken." Anne clapped. "Oh, thank you." On the way home, Anne held Marilla's hand. "I love Green Gables." Marilla smiled. "If you're a good girl, you'll always be happy." Anne sighed happily and started daydreaming. Marilla, amused, was just glad Anne was quiet for a moment. One Friday, Marilla heard from Mrs. Lynde that Anne had decorated her hat with flowers. Marilla was upset and asked Anne about it. "Anne, why did you put flowers on your hat? It looked silly," Marilla said. Anne said, "I know the flowers don't look good on me." "It's not about the colors," Marilla replied. "It was silly to put flowers on your hat at all." Anne felt bad and said, "I'm sorry. Maybe you should send me back to the orphanage." Marilla felt bad too and said, "No, Anne, I don't want to send you back. I just want you to act like other girls. But I have some good news. Diana Barry came home today. You can come with me to meet her." Anne was nervous but excited. What if Diana doesn't like me? "Don't worry," Marilla said. "I'm sure she'll like you. Just be polite." At Diana's house, Mrs. Barry greeted them. Diana and Anne went to the garden, and Anne asked, "Do you think we can be best friends?" Diana smiled and said, "I think so. I'm happy you're here." Anne asked, "Will you promise to be my best friend forever?" Diana said, "I promise." Anne was so happy. She couldn't wait to tell Marilla and share the chocolates Matthew gave her with Diana. Anne was starting to feel like she really belonged at Green Gables. When Anne started school, Marilla worried about how she'd fit in. But Anne came home happy after her first day. "I think I'll like school," she said, though she wasn't fond of the teacher. "But I like sitting by the window and looking at the lake of shining waters. The girls are nice, though I like Diana best." 3 weeks later, Anne and Diana were walking to school again. On a crisp September morning, Diana said, "I think Gilbert Blythe will be there today. He's been visiting his cousins, but now he's back. He's very handsome, but he teases girls." "Gilbert Blythe?" Anne asked. "Isn't his name written on the porch wall with Julia Bell's?" "Yes," Diana replied, "but I think he doesn't like her. He jokes about her freckles." Anne, embarrassed about her own freckles, quickly said, "Don't talk about freckles. Writing names on walls is silly." At school, Anne saw Gilbert for the first time. He was teasing Ruby Gillis by pinning her braid to her seat. Everyone laughed, and Anne thought he was handsome but bold. She didn't like how he winked at her. Later in class, Gilbert tried to get Anne's attention. When she ignored him, he picked up her red braid and whispered, "Carrots, carrots." Anne was furious. She stood up, grabbed her slate, and cracked it over his head. The class gasped, and the teacher made Anne stand in front. With a note saying she had a bad temper, Anne refused to look at Gilbert. At the end of the day, he tried to apologize, but Anne ignored him. On the way home, she said firmly, "I'll never forgive Gilbert Blythe. He insulted me, and I'll never speak to him again." Anne decided not to return to school until Mr. Phillips wasn't the teacher. Marilla wasn't sure what to do, but she let Anne stay home and cool off. While at home, Anne did her lessons on her own. Despite her anger at Gilbert, she still loved Diana. One evening, Anne cried, worried that Diana might leave her. When she got married, Marilla smiled at Anne's imagination, but knew her feelings were real. In the end, Marilla realized that life with Anne would always be interesting. She began to understand that Anne's passionate nature, while sometimes challenging, brought joy to their lives. One sunny day, Marilla gave a small smile and said, "Why don't you invite Diana over for tea?" Anne's eyes sparkled. "Oh, Marilla, that sounds wonderful. Can I use the rosebud tea set?" "No, that's for special occasions. Use the brown one. But you can serve cherry preserves, fruitcake, and cookies." That afternoon, Diana arrived in her best dress. At first, the girls acted polite, almost like strangers, but soon they ran outside to pick apples and enjoy the crisp October breeze. When they returned inside, Anne poured Diana a drink from a tall bottle. "Try this. It's raspberry cordial," she said proudly. Diana took a sip and smiled. "This is delicious." She drank 3 glasses, calling it the best she'd ever tasted. Anne beamed, thinking the afternoon was perfect. But soon Diana's smile faded. She blinked, swayed in her seat, and murmured, "Anne, I feel strange." Moments later, she stood unsteadily. "I think I need to go home." Anne's excitement turned to worry as she helped her friend out the door. The next morning, Anne was met with terrible news. The drink hadn't been raspberry cordial. It was Marilla's homemade wine. Diana had gotten sick, and her mother was furious. "She says I can never see Diana again," Anne cried to Marilla. "She thinks I did it on purpose." Marilla sighed. "It was a mistake, Anne, but Mrs. Barry is stubborn. I'll talk to her, but I can't promise anything." Despite Marilla's efforts, Diana's mother wouldn't forgive Anne. Days passed, and Anne felt Diana's absence like a heavy shadow. Her first tea party had turned into something she would never forget. One cold January night, Marilla and Mrs. Rachel Lynde went to Charlottetown, leaving Anne and Matthew at Green Gables. Anne wanted to read but had to finish her lessons first. She asked Matthew about geometry, but he hadn't studied it. Frustrated, she kept working. Suddenly, the front door burst open and Diana Barry rushed in, pale with fear. "Anne, you must come quickly. Minnie May is terribly sick with croup, and my parents aren't home." Anne jumped up and grabbed her coat. "Don't worry, Diana. I've seen croup before. I know what to do." They ran through the cold night to Diana's house. Inside, Minnie May lay in bed, feverish and struggling to breathe. Anne remained calm, heated water to fill the room with steam, and carefully gave Minnie May her medicine. All night, she stayed by the little girl's side, cooling her forehead and speaking softly. By dawn, Minnie May's breathing eased, and the doctor arrived. He examined her and nodded. "She's much better now. Anne, you saved her life." When Mrs. Barry returned home, she was overwhelmed with gratitude. "Anne, I misjudged you before. You're a brave, kind girl. You and Diana can be friends again." Anne returned to Green Gables, where Marilla was waiting. "Mrs. Barry told me everything. You saved Minnie May's life," she said, hiding her pride. Anne's heart swelled with happiness. "And best of all, Diana and I are friends again." That afternoon, she ran back to Diana's house without her coat, too excited to care. They spent the day making taffy and laughing together. That night, as Anne lay in bed, she whispered a prayer of gratitude. Outside, the stars twinkled as if celebrating the happy ending of that cold January night. One February evening, Anne asked Marilla if she could visit Diana. Marilla hesitated but said yes. Anne came back glowing with joy. Diana had invited her to stay overnight for her birthday and go to a concert. At first, Marilla said no, thinking concerts weren't suitable for young girls. But when Matthew gently supported Anne, Marilla changed her mind, and Anne was thrilled. That evening, Anne and Diana rode in a sleigh to the concert, enjoying the snowy road and the moonlight above. The concert was wonderful with music and laughter all around. Except for one thing, Gilbert Blythe. Anne spotted him in the crowd. He smiled and tried to catch her attention a few times, but Anne stared straight ahead, pretending not to see. Even when he clapped loudly after her favorite song, she refused to react. Though a small part of her was curious about him, she reminded herself firmly, "I will not forgive him yet." When they returned to Diana's house, the girls tiptoed into the guest room, giggling in the dark. Without realizing, they jumped into Aunt Josephine's bed, thinking it was empty. With a loud yelp, Aunt Josephine sat up in shock. Anne immediately stood up and apologized bravely, her voice shaking but sincere. Aunt Josephine, at first grumpy, was impressed by Anne's courage and manners. The next morning, she gave Diana a silver bracelet to show she wasn't angry. Anne was delighted. They had made a friend out of a mistake. Later, Anne told Marilla with shining eyes, Aunt Josephine turned out to be a kindred spirit after all. One warm June afternoon, Anne came home with a serious look on her face. Today was Mr. Phillips's last day, she told Marilla, almost in tears. The whole class cried, even Jane. It felt so sad, like something important was ending. But Anne didn't stay sad for long. Summer vacation was coming, and that made her heart light again. She soon had something new to talk about. "Marilla, I met the new minister's wife, Mrs. Allen. She's so kind and beautiful, and she really listens when you speak. I think she's the loveliest woman I've ever met." At church, Anne loved how cheerful and friendly Mrs. Allen was, and she hoped they could be friends. So when Anne heard that the Allens were coming to visit Green Gables, she wanted to impress them. She asked Marilla if she could bake a cake all by herself. She worked hard to make it perfect. But something went wrong. Anne had used liniment, a strong-smelling medicine, instead of vanilla. Marilla noticed something strange and checked the bottle. When Anne realized her mistake, she was crushed. "I've ruined everything!" she cried and ran to her room in shame. But when Mrs. Allen arrived and heard what had happened, she just laughed gently. "It's okay, Anne. It was only a little mistake," she said with a smile. Anne felt so relieved. Later, she showed Mrs. Allen her flower garden, full of color and joy. That night, as she looked out her window, Anne said softly, "Tomorrow is a new day with no mistakes in it yet." Marilla smiled and joked, "Try not to make any new ones." Anne laughed. Don't worry, I never make the same mistake twice. I always find new ones. One cold December evening, the kitchen at Green Gables was filled with soft laughter and excitement. Anne and her friends were practicing for the upcoming Christmas play, their voices echoing through the warm, fire-lit room. Sitting quietly in the corner, Matthew watched with a gentle smile, but something tugged at his heart. While the other girls wore bright, fancy dresses, Anne danced around in her plain, simple clothes. Her eyes sparkled with joy, but Matthew saw what she didn't say out loud. He knew what she had always dreamed of, a dress with puffed sleeves. And in that quiet moment, Matthew made a decision. The next day, he went into town, determined to buy Anne the perfect Christmas gift. But when faced with the rows of lace and ribbons, he froze. Instead of the dress, he came home with a garden rake and a bag of brown sugar. Embarrassed, but still full of hope, he turned to Mrs. Lynde. Mrs. Lynde, touched by Matthew's kind heart, promised to sew the most beautiful dress Anne had ever seen, complete with puffed sleeves, just like the ones Anne had imagined in her dreams. On Christmas morning, Anne opened the package with trembling hands. The moment her eyes landed on the dress, she gasped. It's the most beautiful thing in the world," she whispered, tears shining in her eyes. That evening, Diana gifted her a pair of delicate slippers. Dressed in her lovely gown and new shoes, Anne felt like she had stepped into a fairy tale. At the Christmas concert, she shone on stage, her voice clear and full of confidence. After the concert, Anne and Diana walked home under the stars, their hearts full. "It was perfect," Anne said softly. "I felt like a princess." Back at Green Gables, Marilla and Matthew sat together in the quiet kitchen. Marilla looked over at Matthew and nodded. "She's growing up, Matthew. We need to start thinking about her future." Matthew gave a small smile. "She's special. We'll give her every chance we can." And in that warm, hopeful moment, the future felt just as bright as Anne's Christmas dress. One evening in September, Anne was walking home through Lover's Lane, leading the cows. Suddenly, Diana came running toward her, her eyes full of excitement. "Anne!" she cried. "Aunt Josephine is taking us to the town fair." Anne gasped. "Really? A fair?" Her heart beat fast. Then she frowned. "But will Marilla let me go?" Diana smiled. "My mother will ask her." "Don't worry." Anne crossed her fingers and hoped. The next day, Marilla said yes. Anne was so happy she twirled around the room. She wore a new coat and a soft cap that Matthew had bought just for her. She felt like a princess. When they got to Aunt Josephine's big house, Anne could hardly sit still. Then they went to the fair. Anne's eyes grew wide at the bright lights, colorful booths, and even hot air balloons. She ate candy and saw funny shows. The next day, Aunt Josephine took them to a concert. The music was so beautiful, Anne almost cried. She whispered, "I never want this day to end." But soon it was time to go home. As the sun set and the moon rose, the road looked like gold and silver. When Anne stepped back into Green Gables, she smiled and said, "It was a wonderful trip, but home is the best place of all." One quiet evening, Marilla sat in the kitchen. She looked at Anne, who was lying on the floor, staring into the fire. A book was beside her, but she wasn't reading. She was dreaming big dreams. Marilla watched her with a small smile. She loved Anne very much, even if she didn't always say it. Then Marilla spoke. "Miss Stacy came today. You were out with Diana." Anne sat up quickly. "Miss Stacy? Did she say something about me?" Marilla nodded. "She wants to start a special class. It's for students who want to go to Queen's College. She asked if you could join." Anne's eyes lit up like stars. "Queen's College? To become a teacher?" she gasped. "Oh, Marilla, I've dreamed about this forever." But then her smile faded. "Can we afford it?" she asked in a small voice. Marilla gently said, "We'll make it work, Anne. You've earned this chance." Anne jumped up and hugged her tightly. "I'll study so hard. I won't waste it." "Well, maybe just a little in geometry," she added with a grin. Marilla chuckled. "Just take your time. Don't try to do everything at once." Anne was filled with joy, even though Diana wouldn't be in the class. Spring came and the sun was bright and warm. It was hard to sit still and study, but Anne kept going. Miss Stacy promised to come back and help more next year. By the end of the school year, everyone could see how much Anne had changed. Marilla and Mrs. Rachel said she was growing into a smart, kind, and lovely young lady, and Anne knew her dream was just beginning. By September, Anne was ready to study again. She held her books close and smiled. "I even missed geometry," she laughed. Miss Stacy had returned, and now everyone worked hard for the big Queen's College exams. Anne felt nervous, but her dream of becoming a teacher gave her strength. As time passed, Anne changed. She talked less, thought more, and didn't play pretend stories as much. Even Marilla noticed Anne was now taller than her. Spring came and exams were near. Anne worried, especially about geometry. "What if I fail?" she asked. Marilla said gently, "You can try again." But Anne wanted to pass with her friends. During exam week, Anne stayed at Diana's Aunt Josephine's house. She wrote to Diana saying how scared she was. Josie Pye had teased her, saying number 13, Anne's exam number, was bad luck. When the exams were over, Anne waited and waited. She felt unsure. Then one evening, Diana burst into Green Gables waving a newspaper. "Anne, you passed! You're first place with Gilbert!" Anne's heart jumped. She had really done it. That night, Anne looked out her window, whispered a thank you prayer, and smiled. Her dream was coming true. Anne was getting ready to go to Queen's College. There was so much to do. Marilla and Matthew helped her pack and bought her new clothes and supplies. One evening, Marilla gave Anne a soft green fabric. "I thought you might like a pretty dress," she said. Anne's eyes lit up. "It's beautiful, Marilla, thank you." When the dress was finished, Anne wore it and read a poem aloud. Marilla watched her and remembered the little girl who had once come to Green Gables. Now Anne was taller, wiser, and full of dreams. Tears filled Marilla's eyes. "Are you crying because of my poem?" Anne asked. "No," Marilla said. "You've grown so much. I'll miss the little girl you were." Anne hugged her tight. No matter how I change, I'll always love you in Green Gables." The next morning, Anne left with Matthew. Marilla and Diana said goodbye. Marilla stayed home, already missing her. At Queen's, Anne's classes were hard, and she felt a little lonely. Her room was small and plain. That night, she almost cried until Josie Pye knocked on her door. "I'm glad you came," Anne said. Soon, Jane and Ruby joined them. They laughed and talked. Josie said there was a new prize at Queen's the Avery Scholarship. If Anne won, she could go to Redmond College. Anne's heart beat fast. "I'm going to try my best," she thought. Big dreams make life exciting. Anne didn't feel so homesick anymore. Every Friday, she took the train back to Avonlea and walked home with her friends. The cool air, the trees, and seeing Diana made her happy. At Queen's Academy, Anne made new friends like Stella and Priscilla. They loved books and dreams just like Anne. Gilbert walked with Ruby a lot, but Anne didn't think they were a good match. She wished for a friendship like theirs. Anne studied hard. She wasn't just trying to beat Gilbert now. She just wanted to do her best. The spring exams were coming, and everyone was nervous. Anne looked out the window and dreamed about the future. On the day of the results, Anne was too scared to look. She asked Jane to check for her. Everyone cheered for Gilbert. He won the medal. Anne felt a little sad until she heard her name. She had won the Avery Scholarship. She was so happy she could hardly breathe. At the graduation, Anne read her best essay and got her diploma. Matthew and Marilla watched proudly. Marilla smiled and said, "I guess keeping Anne was the best thing we ever did." Back at Green Gables, Anne felt full of joy. She hugged Diana and said, "You'll always be my best friend." But the next day, Anne noticed Matthew was quiet. Marilla told her he had heart trouble. Anne promised to help more on the farm so they could rest. That evening, Anne and Matthew walked through the woods, bringing the cows home. The sky was orange and pink. "I'm proud of you, Anne," Matthew said. "You're my girl." Anne smiled, her heart full. She didn't know everything was about to change. One quiet morning, Marilla was setting the table when she noticed something wasn't right. Matthew stood in the doorway, his face pale. Just then, Anne ran inside, smiling, until she saw Matthew fall to the floor. "Matthew!" she cried, running to him. They called for help, and the doctor came quickly. But it was no use. The doctor said Matthew had passed away peacefully. He didn't feel pain. He was just gone. News spread through Avonlea like the wind. Neighbors came with food and flowers. Everyone loved Matthew. He was gentle, kind, and good. Anne held a bunch of white flowers. She placed them carefully around Matthew's coffin, her hands shaking. She stared at his quiet face, hoping he would open his eyes, but he didn't. Diana came and said, "I can stay with you, Anne." Anne shook her head. "Thank you, but I need to be alone." That night, Anne sat by her window. The stars twinkled above Green Gables. She thought of Matthew's warm smile, his quiet laugh, the way he always believed in her. Tears filled her eyes. Then she began to cry softly at first, then harder. Marilla came and sat beside her. Anne whispered, "What will we do without him?" Marilla took Anne's hand and said, "We have each other, Anne, and I've always loved you." 2 days later, Matthew was buried under a tall tree in the quiet graveyard. The sky was gray. The air was still. Birds didn't sing. Anne and Marilla stood close together. They didn't say much, but their hearts were full. Back at Green Gables, everything looked the same but felt different. Anne missed his footsteps, his voice, his kind eyes. Sometimes she felt bad for smiling. Could she ever be happy again? Mrs. Allen came to visit. She hugged Anne and said, "Matthew would want you to live a full and joyful life. He loved you that much." Anne nodded slowly. I think he's still with me." Inside. And she looked out over the fields of Green Gables, where the wind blew gently and Matthew's love stayed like the breeze forever. The next day, Marilla came home. Her face looked tired and sad. She'd gone to the eye doctor. The doctor gave her bad news. "Marilla," Anne asked, "what did he say?" Marilla sighed. "If I keep using my eyes too much, I might go blind in 6 months." Anne felt her heart drop. "Oh no," she whispered. But then she held Marilla's hand. "You can still save your eyes," she said. "You just need to rest and be careful." Later that day, a man came to visit. He wanted to buy Green Gables. "Marilla can't take care of the farm," he said. Marilla didn't know what to do. Her eyes filled with tears. That night, Anne made a big decision. "I'll give up my scholarship," she said. "I'll stay. I'll teach school in Carmody. I'll help you and take care of Green Gables." Marilla said, "Oh, Anne, I can't let you do that." But Anne smiled. "I want to. You and Matthew gave me a home. Now I want to give something back." News spread quickly in Avonlea. People were surprised that Anne gave up college. But Mrs. Allen and Mrs. Lynde said she did it out of love. Then Anne found out something special. Gilbert Blythe had given up his spot to teach in Carmody just for her. Anne was quiet for a long moment when she heard. Her heart felt warm and full. She thought of all the times Gilbert had helped her, even when she ignored him. She knew now he had always cared. The next day, Anne saw Gilbert near the schoolhouse. She walked up slowly. "Thank you, Gilbert," she said, looking into his eyes. Gilbert smiled. "We were meant to be friends," he said softly. Anne smiled back. They walked together for a while, not saying much. But they didn't need to. Something gentle had started between them, something new and kind. That night, Anne stood outside looking at the stars. The wind was soft. The sky was wide, and Anne smiled. Even if life is hard, she thought, there's always something good just around the bend.